On the one hand, it brings home to us the price that others have paid and still pay for complacency, evasion, and/or failure to grasp the nature and multiple guises of the power drive, the need to dominate, to dictate. On the other hand, it consoles us in that painfully ironic way that others have been there before, and many more are yet lined up to undergo, if I may utilize an apt seasonal metaphor, this being Easter. Many more unsuspecting nations and communities currently insulated from a near insoluble, incurable scourge are lined up to undergo the same calvary. Currently, were still insulated from our scourge. So the product, then, it's just a book, but then more than just a book, written by Professor Kariba Benune, an Algerian presently teaching in Berkeley University. And the title, Your Fatwa Does Not Apply Here. That's the title of the book. It is not a work of fiction. It is a compilation with commentary and analysis, of course, of experiences of individuals, men, women, young, old, professionals, academics, and others, among them our own father. It's a record of unbelievable courage and defiance, yes, also of timorousness, surrender, of self-sacrifice and betrayal, of arrogance and restraint, intelligence and stupidity, fanaticism and tolerance. In short, a document of truth at its most forthright and near unbearable. The eternal narratives of humanity that illustrates the axial relation between the twin polarities called power and freedom, which I persist in pointing out stands as the most common denominator of human history. I feel sad through this absence. Africa north of the Sahara could not meet and speak to Africa's south on Nigerian soil at a time of need, console and instruct us through a shared experience, one from whose darkness one nation recently emerged, and into which the other ours is being dragged by the sheer dead weight of human mindlessness. It is such an important book, one that has a sobering relevance, does one have to reiterate, for this nation. It is not quite over yet for Algeria, by the way. Only 2 days ago, I read in the papers that 11 soldiers were ambushed and killed by forces of identical mental conditioning to the ones that are currently traumatizing this nation. We can only hope that Karima Benune does not have to drastically update her account through a resurgence of a traumatic past. So much on the product itself. Now comes the question, which is what provoked this discourse in London. What would have been the effect of that title on most of us, seeing it displayed in one of the bookstores of a participating publisher by this person? Let's begin from there. Even before we have opened the cover, what impact does it have on us, the local consumers? This is not a rhetorical question. What is it in the title itself that guarantees in advance that the average viewer would instinctively approach it with some trepidation? This is familiar ground, and I must stress once again that I'm continuing the discourse that began elsewhere. It is the phenomenon itself that I wish to place in this specific environment, seeing that the book is available anyway throughout the normal sales channels elsewhere and has been reviewed extensively all over the world. It leads inevitably to the question, have we been shortchanged, albeit through circumstances too convoluted to go into here, in an environment to which such a history is so pertinent? Well, one should not cry over split milk. Yet, one should never let an opportunity go to waste, to recoup one's losses wherever possible, even in divergent directions. In this case, as I hinted earlier, the very absence forms part of our global literary mission. It is of such relevance, this book, that I consider it a work that should be made compulsory reading for everyone in leadership positions in this nation, beginning from the president of this nation all the way to local councillors, irrespective of religion or profession. The book provides an entry point to so many interrogatories for the contestation, the very contestation that is summed up in the title of my address, The Republic of the Mind and the Thraldom of Fear. Questions such as, should such a work constitute a contentious issue in the first place? Is our world now in a condition where a work may possibly narrate unpleasant histories and truths? That such books are approached as an instant minefield for its handlers? Is any interest group, as long as it is sufficiently vociferous, reckless, and dangerous, entitled to be described and menace our world once such a minority decrees even factual history unpalatable and unacceptable? Do we now instinctively make assumptions of a negative response on behalf of such minorities? I pose these questions because of my increasing conviction that our space of volition and equality of choice is rapidly collapsing under internal relationships based on fear and domination, on dictation and imposition. This is not the view of the speaker alone. Both Egypt and Tunisia, one after the other, are solid proofs that this shrinkage of space is a calculated project by the assiduous cultivators of the realm of thraldom. And we have seen how it is answered in both instances. My business here is not to urge the adoption of the solutions pursued in either nation, or indeed in Somalia, for instance, but to point out an existing problem manifested in different ways and degrees, and consequently drawing from different environments unpredictable responses. But quickly, that question. Are people themselves, sometimes collaborators, in the shrinkage of that space of choice, that space of freedom? We must be honest in our answers. When we look into the demands of one sector of society from another, coldly and analytically, we find that very often our instinctive assumptions are totally divergent from the factors that constitute risk to the well-being of others and, of course, our own, both as users of words and as consumers. To begin with this immediate, desperate community in Nigeria as immediate testing ground for the answer to that question, let us consider the case of the people versus Boko Haram. Boko Haram represents the ultimate fatwa of our time. It has placed a fatwa on our very raison d'etre, the mission, the justification of our cultured existence. I do not think that this claim is in contention. The next question is, does the Boko Haram fatwa remotely represent the articulated position of the majority of Muslims in this nation? My reading over the past few years is an unambiguous no. Again and again, the declaration that those words represent in Benuna's title is the very manifesto with which the nation has been inundated by Muslim intellectuals, politicians, community leaders, quite openly in their pronouncements on Boko Haram. They are not true Muslims has become the persistent mantra from north to east to west, all the way southwards across the Niger. Grasping the most recent declaration to hand, the reportage on the governor of Osun State, a Muslim, only 2 days ago went thus. A visibly angry Osun State governor called on Muslims to rise against atrocities perpetrated by the fundamentalist group in the name of religion. In his own words, Agbeshola said, we must protest seriously against the sycophants who hide under religion to perpetrate evils in our land. It must be done nationwide. We reject everything that Boko